Very warm welcome to all the attendees today, and especially to all the panelists who are also alumni of the school, Idranil, Mandar, and Tarun, for taking the time out on a weekend. So really appreciate that. So just to give you a context, I think we have had other webinars where we talked about the program, what's in it and the outcomes and all of that. I think today's webinar is a special one, because we are not going to so much as focus on those aspects, right, about the details and all, but more about the experience of the program and how best you can actually leverage that well beyond the program, right? Because a lot of times, and as an admissions director, I have interviewed a few hundreds of students, at least, if not more, and thousands, but a lot of times come in with a very short-term perspective, join the program, what specializations to take, where do I fit in the class, what kind of companies to look for, how do you prepare. That's all great. I think that's all very important and relevant. But I think it's also very important to look at doing an MBA as a starting point, not an end point, but a starting point of a much longer journey of, building your career, right? I would always say that what's important is not, couple of lakhs of, incremental salary at the beginning of your career. What matters is how fast, let's say, you can become a director, right, in companies, right? Because that's where you are really creating value, both for the organization as well as yourself. So that's having a slightly longer term vision, right? So we have some great, alumni here who have been through interesting experiences. And today, especially, we have, alumni who are in a different country, different continent, different time zone. We first wanted from different parts of the world, but as it happens that everybody is in a different time zone. If you see US, we'll have to do it late evenings or early mornings, right? And that may not work for somebody from UK or getting from Singapore. We have alumni everywhere, right? Now I think they're spread over like more than 30 countries, right? Even in places like Sweden, there's a whole bunch of alumni. In Scandinavia, many working in IKEA, for example, right? So they're in all parts of the world. So today we have, I think hopefully this is the first of a series of sessions. So today we have folks joining in from UK, right? And we are glad that this is the first one that we are kicking off with the series with alumni, and we are glad to have alumni from the very first batches, right? We have from 2006, 2007, and we have Tarun, who is from, let's say, a more recent batch. The idea was also to give you a sense of the journey over, let's say, the medium term and the long term as well, right? So let me first, quickly, introduce our panelists, and from there, I'd request them to share their opening comments about their journey. So first we have Idranil Das. Idranil is currently a director of digital advisory at Microsoft in UK, and he has, advised many CXOs of Fortune 500 companies in their digital transformation across multiple, industries, and so he's somebody, I think, who can give a perspective of also, what's happening in the world in terms of, companies adapting to the digital, transformation. That's not just they wish, but they were forced to undergo, let's say, in a way, and the pandemic only pushed even those companies which were a little reluctant to move faster. So Idranil, if you can just give your opening comments and share your journey.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I think good afternoon to all of you. I'm Idranil. I'm right now based out of London. So I am part of 2006-2007 Crusaders batch in Great Lakes. And before joining Great Lakes, I worked with Tata Steel for about 4.5 years in the area of corporate strategy. And I was, very interested about specializing in finance. And I was actually looking for, the appropriate programs which will give me, the right amount of specialization at the same time. I did not want to end up spending 2 years because, after having spent 4.5, 5 years, I did not want to take a complete 2-year program. So I was looking at programs which can offer me exactly the same kind of, the quality of learning at the same time, very good peer group, right? So one of the reasons why I chose Great Lake was basically the richness of profiles coming in from different walks of life, right? Because when I was interacting with Professor Bala as part of the admission process, I was really amused by the quality of the faculty who typically come to teach at Great Lakes, and also the richness of profile, because bulk of the learning in Great Lakes typically happened in the classroom, where you get an opportunity to be part of different groups, working with different people, sharing your thoughts, being challenged by them. That was absolutely phenomenal. And also, I think over the course of 1 year, we had this opportunity to learn from a number of phenomenal guests who came from different spheres of life, be it from business, be it from politics, be it from sports. And and then also I never missed doing not doing an MBA in the US, or for that matter in the UK, right? Because the quality of learning was so good, and that was definitely one of the reasons why I chose Great Lakes. Now, one important thing I would like to share here is, when you look at choosing as to which business school to join, right? You typically rank order them through probably the average placement salary, the kind of companies that visited the campus, and so on. And let me tell you, this is definitely not the wrong determinant. I think probably 90% of us always carry that at the back of the mind. But what is also important while you are studying the business school is to probably develop a slightly larger worldview, and also a long-term perspective, right? Also, making yourself more resilient to be able to weather any storm. And especially what happened in Great Lakes is because of the fact that you were always thrown amidst multiple challenges. You got very different perspectives. You got some of the best minds coming and teaching you from one of the most established schools in the world. So your worldview becomes very hard. It is really, really great. It is very resilient, and that probably sets you up for taking on any challenge, right? And also, what happened as part of our program, because we kind of started an industry institute interaction, which was probably after 5 or 6 months as part of our curriculum, we started reaching out to different companies to share the profile of our students, and also to talk to them about what are the areas that we specialize in, right? Because back then Great Lakes was relatively new, but at the same time it had all the right profiles, it had all the right infrastructure, it had all the right minds to be able to make the difference. So for me, it was, I was part of institute building, I was part of a brand building, I was also part of soaking in what's really happening in the world. And because of all of that, I thought that I really came up with a very strong perspective. I could build a mindset of resilience, I could build a mindset of longer term perspective, not just looking at what's really happening here and now, what's really the next job. And mind you, I came from a non-IT background. I worked with Tata Steel. So my intention was not to again go back to the manufacturing organization, because manufacturing organization has their own ways of working. So I always wanted to do a career switch, preferably to the side of management consulting, or to the functional side of IT to begin with. And Great Lakes was a phenomenal platform to providing, providing that opportunity to me. So in many ways, I thought it was absolutely phenomenal opportunity. And now I think the school has really grown. I think not only in terms of infrastructure, in terms of its equity, in terms of its diffusion, and also the alumni network has kind of multiplied. So I think we are always happy to share with you any perspective that you might like to, double down on, or any question that you might hear. But for me, when I look back, I thought it was probably one of the best decisions of my life. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Idranil. If you can actually also share in terms of your journey, like, from, let's say, from started with Tata Steel, came to business school. After that,
yes,
where have you been?
Yeah, so I joined Tata Steel as a graduate trainee right after passing out of my engineering from Bengal engineering called Shipment Mechanical Engineering. And then I joined, the raw material division of Tata Steel. and I completed 1 year of graduate traineeship, and then I joined the bearings division. And then eventually I ended up in the corporate strategy. I worked with the strategy office of bearings division, and that's where I spent a lot of my time. And when I did that, I developed a very keen interest about corporate strategy and finance. And I thought that, I should do an MBA, because Ratan Tata was then affiliated with Great Lakes. And, there's a lot of talk about how Great Lakes is actually making a difference in the world of business, in the world of biz school. So, and then I landed up here. And while I was studying in Great Lakes, I ended up with two offers. One was with Cognizant Business Consulting, and the second one was with British Petroleum in the corporate strategy department. But because of some personal constraints, I could not go to Bombay. The BP placement was actually in Bombay. I chose Cognizant. So I joined Cognizant in the retail business, and it was for a large customer. I spent about 11 months in Cognizant. And then I was contacted by ITC, an ITC Indian Tobacco Company. So ITC then was trying to set up an internal management consulting pool. And they said that we are already, present across retail, CPG, hospitality, paper, manufacturing, and we have all the, industrial expertise which are typically required to succeed in those areas. And they were also, kind of pulling in people from different businesses of ITC, and also selectively hiring people from outside of ITC. So I landed up there. And that's where I spent almost 13 years of my life. I worked very closely with ITC's tobacco business, ITC's FMCG business, ITC's retail business. And that also gave me a fairly, very rounded global perspective in terms of packaging some of ITC's capabilities and taking them to, different companies in the world. I worked very closely with Coca-Cola and then British American Tobacco, and, range of at least 15 to 16 large Fortune 500 companies, talking about large commercial transformation and the supply chain transformation, because ITC's supply chain is, the deepest, one of the deepest, right? They reach out to almost 4.5 million outlets across 1,000 SKUs on a daily basis. So while I was doing that, then I came in touch with Microsoft. And because since I was doing a lot of work with BAT, because BAT happens to be one of the biggest investors in ITC, right? So there are a lot of opportunities that ITC folks get in terms of participating in their internal large scale transformations. So while I was doing that, I came in touch with Microsoft, because both Microsoft and BAT were trying to do something called connected consumer, and it was basically a proposition developed for CPG. And they wanted me to be part of that exercise. And while I did that, then Microsoft asked me if I would like to join Microsoft. But unfortunately, in 2017-18, there was some visa constraints, because I was serving under ICT, so I could not join, Microsoft back then. And so what happened was, in 2021 January, right, the then Prime Minister of UK, Boris Johnson, he kind of changed the visa rule. He made it a lot more flexible. So then I could actually, switch from ICT to skilled visa directly, or tier 2 general visa. And then, Microsoft told me that, yes, but that role doesn't exist. So would you be interested in a digital advisory role? I told him that yes. So then, the interviews happened. They made me an offer. Now, 7 months into Microsoft, I got promoted to be the UK director for, retail consumer goods, and also manufacturing and media. And then, then I kind of played that for 5-6 months. And now, all the tech companies in the world are actually undergoing a lot of disruptions. So there are a lot of, the pruning down that's happening. So in my current role, I've just accepted a role to look after retail for whole of EMEA for Microsoft. So I will continue to be based in the UK, but I would be, looking after retail businesses across the entire, entire EMEA. So definitely it's a pretty, enchanting and exciting journey when I look back. So I kind of cut across at least 3-4 industries, and been part of some of the very large transformation programs, came in touch with some of the finest minds in the industry. So that way it's, pretty interesting. And yeah, so that's about it.
So that's an awesome journey, Idranil, and on multiple dimensions. One, within 15 years of graduating from business school, you are a director at a global level, looking at operations in multiple companies across the entire EMEA region. for one of the world's largest companies, right? That's one. But second, also in terms of the kinds of roles you handle, getting into Cognizant, from there to an ITC to a Microsoft. These are all technically different industries, right? One is a services firm, one's is a traditional FMCG company, but started with services division. That's where they wanted you, and finally a product company, right? So which again is in multiple different areas. So that's an interesting journey, because a lot of times what happens is that students tend to bucket, right, at the initial days, companies into bucket A, B, C, that if I get into this is where I'm going to be, right? But the first job is just one step over many steps that you'll take in your career, right? And we are talking about only 15 years, whereas I'm guessing you would be somewhere still in 40s, early 40s maybe, right? So at least under 20 years of your career is still there. You're not even halfway through, right? And you're already in a great position. So I think that's a message that it's a career is a series of steps, right? And once you get into the industry, what matters is performance, right? For example, here Microsoft experience you working with them, right? And that gives them the confidence that even if a year later you go back, they still want to get you in a role that doesn't exist. They still want you there, right? They still want you to work with them, right? So that's a credibility that one can build within the industry, the reputation and the network and all of that, right? So those are all very important takeaways, right? And for all of that, the base is that during business school, more than getting the best job, what matters is you get the best learning, right? Because that's what helps you in the rest of your career, right? If you sleep through your year, just get a job by fluke, it will remain that, right? Maybe you'll start off well, but not necessarily you'll have that compounded growth rate, right? And if you see entire history of even nations, right, what matters is not the starting point. What matters is the compounded growth rate, right? That's why interest rates and all, even 0.25, we talk about it, right? Markets move because RBI increased, or Federal Reserve increased by 0.5 or 0.25, right? Because India and China were at the same level. China just 1990 or till 1990, and in 20-30 years China became 5x of India, just because it grew like 3 or 4 percentage points faster than us, right? So what matters is laying that foundation where you can grow really fast, right? So thanks, Idranil, for sharing that. Come to Mandar. Mandar is, I would say, from similar vintage. He's graduated, I think, a year or two after Idranil. But again, you also had the experience of going to Great Lakes in the initial years, right, where we had nothing, right, in terms of the hardware, right? No campus, just a building. I think in Saidapet, right, a very ordinary building. But I think what we had then, and what Idranil also mentioned, was the intellectual capital, right? And ultimately, learning is about people, not so much about the buildings. Now we are lucky to have a great campus, a fabulous one, right, and a much larger scale infrastructure, all of that. But I think those days was a very different experience. So Mandar, what made you want to do an MBA? Right, and what was your experience since? But before that, let me just tell everyone that Mandar is currently at Amazon Web Services in UK. He's a global engagement manager. He has handled fairly large scale projects at the global level across, and his responsibilities again are over a different spectrum of areas, from consulting to program management to technology, working with different client industries, whether manufacturing, consumer goods, oil and gas, right? So that's a very broad spectrum. And again, I'm sure now you have a fairly global perspective as well. So Mandar, if you can share your journey as well as the experience.
Sure. Thank you for the introduction, kind of you. So just one correction. So I am from the 2009-2010 batch, the Patriots batch, and I was actually part of the first batch in the new campus at Manamai. So as you said, we just had a building. Even in the new campus, I had the pleasure of visiting the campus in 2015 last, before I moved to the UK. and meeting the late Professor T.N. Swaminathan then, who sort of showed me around the campus, and it's state of the art now. It's beyond recognition, like what we had when we started in 2009 to where it is now. So just to share a little bit about my journey. So just like Idranil, I was in the corporate sector, but not in heavy industry or manufacturing. I was in traditional technology, working for General Electric in the US in manufacturing, but on the IT side. So working with them in the supply chain domain, I got quite interested in operations management as a career, and I was then looking at options within India. Within India, just purely looking at the value that you get out of an education versus going to the US, UK, or anywhere in Europe. And it was a no-brainer that Great Lakes was the right choice for me. And what sort of cinched the deal for me was a Meet the Dean session in Mumbai, where I was working with Uncle Bala at that time, and of course the late Professor TNS as well, where they explained that Great Lakes is a student-run institute, and that was one of the experiences I was wanting to have as part of my MBA. So being part of either a placement committee or an admissions committee, and actually driving things for business for your B school, giving back to your B school as well as contributing in a material way. And that's what really interested me in Great Lakes. And as Idranil already said, the other aspect was getting to work with highly professional individuals who have significant amount of experience in the industry as part of your 1-year journey. And the third thing was something Uncle Bala used to always say is, everybody knows the time value of money, but Great Lakes is where you get the money value of time, right? So you look at a 2-year MBA for somebody who's experienced. That second year of MBA, which is primarily to get your internship and your experience, you actually start your corporate career from that year if you take up a 1-year MBA. And that was, those three things really cinched the deal for me in choosing Great Lakes over other institutes that I had applied to. So as part of Great Lakes, immediately when I joined in, I took up the opportunity to join a particular student-run committee, and I was always interested in admissions committee, where I get to interact with students like yourselves and obviously panelists, industry specialists as well. And where Great Lakes is quite different from other institutes, what I felt is that you're actually given a lot of ownership in terms of driving particular activities for that committee. So as part of admissions committee, we were given a budget. There were 4 of us as part of what we call a core group, and we were given a budget to manage 5 main cities as part of the admission cycle. So right from interacting with prospective students, working with media and networking in terms of branding communications out to them in terms of when the admission cycles are starting, what scores are accepted for as part of admissions, and then meeting prospective students in different cities with Meet the Dean sessions, organizing these sessions, organizing the actual admission cycle, doing all the paperwork behind the scenes. So sort of looking at resumes, obviously, with the guidance of somebody senior in the admissions committee. And in our time, it was Professor TNS. And then obviously crunching the numbers behind the scenes as well, working late nights, early mornings to sort of get it out the gate on time. And obviously managing the actual admission cycle on the day. So scheduling the interviews, making sure that the panelists have got enough breaks in between the interviews. So these are small things, but actually as part of my MBA journey, that gave me a lot of experience into the real world. And through this, I really got interested in project and program management, which I took up as a career just after graduating from Great Lakes in 2010. So when I joined Wipro initially as a business analyst, I then looked for opportunities to move into project management / consulting. And in 2011, late 2011, I got the opportunity to move into Wipro's consulting division, which was at that time called Wipro Consulting Services. Now it's called Wipro Digital Consulting. And I started working with global energy companies such as Shell and BP to manage their projects in the supply chain domain and sales and marketing domain across, if you have experience in oil and gas, that you have upstream, midstream, and downstream. So I've worked across, over the last sort of 11 years, I've worked across all areas in oil and gas, right from drilling, reservoir management, geoscience, in terms of midstream, which is transportation and distribution, and also in terms of enterprise data, so cloud journey. And that's where I got introduced to the AWS team, the Amazon Web Services team. Excuse me. So we were working with British Petroleum in 2018-19, helping them move their workloads to the cloud, and that's where I got introduced to Amazon. So I had about a 2-year stint with them, working as part of Wipro, a hybrid team. And then being introduced to them, I got interested in how they work with other customers as well. So just like Idranil, I was in the right place at the right time with Mr. Boris Johnson announcing the right type of visa, which could allow us to sort of move between jobs within the UK. And I moved to AWS in 2021. So just under 2 years now. And again, after going to AWS, I've been working with customers in the automobile space generally for the first year. But then since last year, I'm back to working with, in Europe, we call them the big evil oil corporations. So I'm back to working with global energy customers since 2022. But the good thing is that I now have exposure to working with renewable energy companies. So companies across Germany, Australia, US, India, and Europe who have invested in solar, battery power, hydroelectricity, hydrogen as a renewable energy source as well, and helping these customers or helping these companies move over to AWS as part of even our global ambitions of becoming carbon neutral by 2025, right? So that's sort of my journey in short. And one of the things that Idranil said sort of interested me quite a lot is why is Great Lakes relevant, or why did you pick Great Lakes? I think one of the things that I've seen over the years, even after graduating from Great Lakes, and I'm still in touch with some of the alumni as well as the current batch students or coordinators, is that I've seen that Great Lakes has kept pace with the time. So when we graduated, AI and ML was a buzzword, not really taught extensively in any schools. But since then, what I've seen is that just after we graduated, Great Lakes introduced a course called BABI, which is Business Analytics and Business Intelligence. And then over the years, I've seen Great Lakes sort of set up incubation center for venture capitalists and funding if you're interested in building startups. Mr. Gautam can obviously add more to that as once he speaks. And also I've seen courses like data science, courses like AI ML being introduced as part of the curriculum, which I think is a step in the right direction. As Idranil said, it's building resiliency. So everyone who comes into Great Lakes now is assured that they are in pace with time, right? So they're not studying something that is outdated. They're obviously getting industry experts as they come in. As Idranil said, you get professors from across the globe, global talent in to teach you these courses. You're getting hands-on experience as part of working with different committees. Plus, you're getting this up-to-date knowledge, which is quite relevant. So when we go out in the market right now and look for skills, those are the skills that we look for, right? AI, ML, business intelligence. And I think Great Lakes is doing a fabulous job of keeping pace with time. Yeah, so that's my journey overall. Hope that was useful.
Thanks, Mandar. I think that again gives students, or future students, opportunity to look at building a career in steps, right, and also developing expertise. Now, you have been in an IT role before coming to business school, and post that again you're in, let's say, project management and consulting roles, first at Wipro, and now you're managing large projects at Amazon AWS, right? So one of the things that people have is that they have a certain notions. Even people who work in IT, right, have a notion of IT, or even IT consulting for that matter, is something to do with, let's say, maybe coding and all, especially people who are not from IT. And for them, definitely they won't have the exposure. For them, what they mostly see is people joining companies in most of the workforce being in these areas, right? So how do you see your role, right? You spend significant amount of time with working with oil and industry companies, right, and to some extent with automobiles and so on. So what's the expertise that you bring in, right, as a post MBA, right, and where is the value in that?
So I think the value sort of that you get from an MBA is acting as a bridge between domain technology and consulting, and that's primarily my role, right? So I always sort of surround myself with smart people in technology. I'm not the smartest person in the room when it comes to coding in Python or writing Java or any code, right? So because there are many people better than me who do that. I'm not an expert when it comes to oil and gas because there are people with 30 years experience as petroleum engineers who sort of are in the room who know more about, for example, geospatial mapping than I do, right? And there are many people in the sort of the business side as well who know their stuff more than I do. But what we need is some like a conduit, so somebody who can bring them together as technology, domain, and consulting, and drive your customers' requirements or your organization's requirements forward. And that's the sort of role that I play. So I have a flavor of technology, I have a flavor of domain, being in oil and gas for 10 years. And I have a flavor of consulting as well, working with Wipro and AWS over the last sort of 12, 13 years, and as well as what I learned in Great Lakes. So that's sort of the skill set that I bring in, right? So tailoring the conversations for your audience is a skill that you pick up, as you sort of work in organizations, as part of your MBA as well. So talk to the audience in their language that they understand. So talk to a technology guy or a technology person in their language. Talk to a business person in their language, and that's sort of the skill that I think an MBA imparts in you. Obviously, with networking with other professionals as well.
Thank you. Yeah. Let me introduce Tarun. Tarun is from a much more recent batch, relatively. Tarun, I think you graduated in 2017, right? So about nearly 6 years post MBA. So Tarun has, been in business development throughout. I think first he was managing business development at Wipro in Bangalore, and now he's been a strategic account manager at Amazon again in UK. Right? I don't know if both of you know each other, Mandar and Tarun.
No, we don't, unfortunately not.
So great.
But
So
I'm sure after this, now we do.
yes. So I think that's great. So both of you are in London, both of you are in Amazon. So maybe in different divisions. These are fairly large companies. So maybe an opportunity to connect. Right. So incidentally, we just had a alumni meet in Hyderabad. I was part of that, and we had one person from I think 2006 who's a director at ADP, right? And there is a whole bunch of 7-8 recent graduates from I think 2021 or 2022 again in ADP, right? And that's a great occasion for them to find a mentor within the company, right? Somebody who's at a director level, and they got connected. So hopefully, as we have more of this, we'll also help you guys to also connect. So Tarun, you come from a very different experience. I think by 2017, I think we are a well-established large campus, right? So what made you do an MBA? How was the experience, and how's the journey been post that?
Sure, Gautam. So first of all, I just wanted to thank you, first of all, Gautam sir, thank you. And also wanted to thank Idranil sir and Mandar sir. I mean, hearing from you did really make me realize, Gautam, like you said, that by the time I made a decision to do an MBA, Great Lakes was very, very different as to what Idranil and Mandar sir was sort of describing. I couldn't at all relate to it, the lack of infrastructure or things like that. There was no question for me. So yeah, very quickly jumping on to the point, let me begin with a quick intro in terms of where I started and how I landed at Great Lakes, and then I'll get to the YMB question if that it's okay with you, Gautam.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I think again, like most of the Indian children at that point of time, I was pushed into doing or taking up science after my 10th board exams, and then the whole concept around mera beta engineer banega, my son has to become an engineer also, was there with me. And then I did my BTech from Kurukshetra University, and then I joined Accenture initially in 2014, where I was working for one of their financial services client in the quality assurance domain. And again, I think from day one, even before I started working, I had or I was fortunate enough that I had people in the family who had gone through the same stage, and I'd seen how their careers had progressed. So I had that thing that I need to do an MBA after a few years of experience always in the back of my head. So even from day one, I knew that I'm just here for maybe a year or two, and then I'm going preparing for my CAT and doing the MBA, and all of that was always there. So I did that job for around 2.5 years, I believe, with Accenture, gave my CAT exam, and then that's when Great Lakes happened. So quick one on the why MBA part of it, and now I'm having some nostalgia while I was preparing for my MBA interviews. Um, so again, like I told you, a part of it was that looking at people before me who had gone through the same process, it did give me an idea. Okay, this is a path which is clearly laid out. This is a path which has worked well for others as well who have similar mindset, similar ambitions, similar um, growing strategies or growth strategies as I do. So maybe this is one of the things that I should also look at doing in the long term. And the final nail in the coffin was during my term with Accenture, when again, like I told you, I was working for a project, and it was one of the largest projects Accenture had at that point of time, or maybe the second largest it had at that point of time. And we were about 1,500 people assigned to the project. And suddenly, I think the one day the client stood up and they decided that they don't want to work with Accenture anymore. And there was a situation within the company or within the 1,500 sized project that, oh, what's going to happen with us? Are we going to be put on bench? Are we going to be laid off? What's happening? So on and so forth. And then a few weeks down the line, we get the news that, okay, somebody somewhere did something, and we still have the project at hand, and we continue to work as it is. And then that question came to me that, who is this somebody somewhere who's responsible for the decision making on what happens to 1,500 people in a company, and how do they even do this? And that's when I learned that there are these people called consultants sitting somewhere in the Accenture world, talking, interacting directly with the client, and making all of these things possible. And that's, like I said, right, it was the final nail in the coffin, and I was like, yes, that's what I want to do. I want to be somewhere somehow responsible to contribute directly to the PNL of my employer or whichever company I work for. And yeah, then I think I joined Great Lakes 2016-17, the flagship. It had become the flagship one-year program by that point of time. And again, why Great Lakes was very different for me. I did not have a question around how capable Great Lakes as an institute, when you talk about infrastructure, faculty, quality of placements, there was no question about that at all for me. It was, I think, at that point of time, one of the top 5 institutes in the country offering the one-year program, if I recall correctly. And yeah, it was a pretty quick, straightforward, clear decision for me. I knew that I'll again, yeah, one of the factors again was the one-year program. I did not want to go out there and go back to studying for 2 full years. And like I said, Great Lakes had that flagship program, top 5 in the country. That was one definite factor which influenced me. The second factor that influenced me was the admissions criteria. So for the flagship program, I don't know how it is now, but at my 5 years ago or 6 years ago, you had to have at least 24 years of work experience to get into the program. And that was
Months,
also
24 months.
24,
Yeah.
sorry, my bad. My bad. 24 months of work experience to get into the program. And that was also an influencing factor because I knew that I'll be present in or with a group of people who had worked before. It won't be entire, fresh people. They would have a similar mindset, similar ambition. They would have done, different sort of works across different companies, and there would be great opportunities to learn, not just from the faculty, but from my peers as well. That was one influencing factor. And like I said, I was working with Accenture in the IT industry. I did not want to really change from an IT to a different industry at that point of time. And again, 5 years ago, Great Lakes, when I looked at the placements, we had a lot of good quality IT companies visiting the campus, taking the students up for jobs. And that was, I think, the third influencing factor which helped me make my decision for Great Lakes.
Yeah, thanks, Tarun, for that short perspective on why you chose. And so one of the things that students typically have, right, as I said, you chose because it was a one-year program. Right, and I think that's a very clear-cut value proposition, which I think a lot of students who opt for the PGPM take into consideration. And as Idranil also mentioned, Dr. Bala used to mention the money value of time. Right, time itself is more valuable nowadays than money. People all have, I think, if you're reasonably well educated, you all have money, but most people end up not having enough time, right? Post getting busy with your careers and kids and everything, the one thing that you find in short is time, right? And these days, the entire premium is in cutting down on time, right? Now delivery companies want to do it in 10 minutes, right? That's that's a competitive advantage that they want to build, right? And Amazon, you both are from Amazon. Amazon's entire advantage came from its ability to deliver in a short period of time, apart from being extremely customer centric. Right. So the one-year program offers that value proposition in terms of the time and being able to get into the industry and gain post MBA experience. Right, where that itself helps you further in your career, right? As you gain more experience, more opportunities open up. But what about the experience during the program itself, right? In terms of learning, being as much as one does during, let's say, 2 years, right? So when I get these questions, I talk about, in a way, the PGPM experience being superior to a typical 2-year program. At Great Lakes, we offer the 2-year program also. So it's not like, I would say that because of any preference, but just in terms of facts, right? There's two things, quantity and quality. In terms of quantity, yes, there is a certain amount of time. You spend 18 months, not exactly 2 years, but a 2-year program is actually 18 months, right? If you take out the internship when it starts and ends, you spend 18 months. In the PGPM, you spend maybe 11 months, right? So that's a quantitative aspect, but time is what we make out of it. How much time we actually spend deeply engaged and learning and doing things, right? That's whether that's what matters, not how many days you spend, but more importantly, qualitatively, right? At the end of the day, an MBA experience is all about qualitative changes within yourself, right? And your perspective, and that's where people with experience, having a peer group with people coming from every single background, that I'd say actually provides a far superior learning experience compared to a 2-year program where maybe 40-50% are freshers with very homogeneous background, very academic centric and book and exam centric mindset, right? That's what freshers come with, at least till they get into their summer internship, right? Which maybe for many of them the first time they ever stepped into a corporate role. So what do you think is, like, the learning experience in the PGPM like, and how does it compare with maybe some friends or peers who had done a 2-year program? Do you think it's on par? Do you think there was any kind of handicap?
So I would like to, answer that from my perspective, because I probably joined the program when I was already 4.5, very close to about 5 years of work ex, right? But I always worked inside of a function, right? Because I worked in supply chain, I worked in corporate strategy. So I definitely had appreciation of that function to a reasonable degree. But what happened during my, stint at Great Lakes is I could see the big picture in a lot more effortless manner, because I would have otherwise struggled to, elevate myself above the function and look at the macro, and then look at the company in terms of its entire value chain, and really look at the macro picture, right? So that I thought was hugely enabled by, by the program. And also, when you have spent 4.5, 5 years in a particular industry or in a particular company, you got surrounded with people who probably talk the same language. You are trained to think in one direction, but as you are exchanging thoughts with people from different walks of life, so that unidimensional suddenly becomes multidimensional, and then you begin to be a lot more open about different perspectives. Your ability to digest them, process them, and come up with a resultant view is enormously improved. So these two things I would double down on. One is ability to, see the big picture, elevate yourself from the function that you have historically spent your time in, and also, creating these heterogeneous perspectives, and then eventually come up with resultants, not just a unidimensional thinking. So in short, these two are my biggest takeaways from the
So
program.
does the fact that it's 1 year versus 2 year, does that make a difference
No,
in
because
terms of
one
your
year,
learning?
1 year you would not even realize when the time has really gone by. But one difference that most of us had, I don't know what is the student composition of the 1 year program now, but in our during our time, the average incoming experience of a 1 year program was probably 3.5, 4 years. So people,
Similar now, it's similar.
yeah, so people probably came in with a little bit of pre-knowledge. They already knew what they wanted of the program, as opposed to probably a 2 year program where people are a lot more open about discovery during the course of the program, really. So that way, they knew where to specialize, and they already brought in a lot of specialism in their respective fields. So when you are creating, a case study group, or when you are doing some cross-pollination, the quality of interaction used to be phenomenal. So I'm talking about not just inside the classroom, but also outside the classroom. So that created a multiplier effect. So what you probably would have achieved in a period of 2.5, 3 years, you ended up achieving in just about 2.5, 3 months, because of the richness of the interaction. And that's really served me well. And I'm sure I can speak on behalf of quite a few of my, batchmates during that time. So when we kind of discuss off the classroom, outside of at office hours, when we meet in a bar or a pub. So it's typically always like that.
Thank you. I think that's exactly what, as I said, I also communicate. It's a quality of learning, because MBA is not about, how many hours have you spent in the classroom. It's about those conversations that sparkle change in your thought, right? When you talk to people who come from different backgrounds, right? In the PGPM, you have students with certain level of maturity, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that they have handled challenges in the real world,
Exactly.
right? Because management at the end of the day is about dealing with constraints, right? It's one thing when you are just a student and parents are taking care of everything. You don't understand constraints or the responsibilities that you have in your corporate world, right? So the steepest learning is in the first couple of years of your corporate experience, right? And that's the reason the PGPM requires at least 2 years of experience, so that you are at a different level when you come in. And I'm happy to also share that now the last 2-3 batches, we have been consciously pushing for more diversity, right? And in a given class, we will have somebody who's like a chef, architects, dentists, doctors, journalists. This
That's
batch,
phenomenal.
current batch has a Indian Navy pilot.
Well, we also had, one from Indian Navy in our batch.
Sure. So that's always been the case, right? And while people look at statistics, yes, more people come from IT and all, because that's where, parents, like Tarun mentioned, right? Parents want the kids to become engineers, and after engineering, most of the jobs were in IT, right? The last 20 years, that's a reality of our country, and all credit to IT for creating those jobs. We are very lucky that way, and hence a lot of students come from that background, and a lot of students also get into related areas because of the background. But the fact is that within the class, you'll find people from every single background. And I think it's a better experience for everyone around, right, to have the diversity. So even if percentage wise, certain segments are less, the fact is that there are people there, and you can always interact with them, learn from them, collaborate with them, right? So those are opportunities that are always there, and we definitely welcome. In fact, we instituted some diversity cum merit scholarships, right, to specifically focus on increasing the diversity from underrepresented areas. Right now, we'll take up some of the questions that the audience have posed.
May I add something, Gautam?
Sure.
That's
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
So directly touching your question around 1 year versus 2 year. From my point of view, when I was at Great Lakes, and again, you also had the point around comparing it with other people doing the 2-year thing. I mean, I feel that even though looks like it's half the course, however, you have everything that a 2-year MBA program will happen or will have to offer squeezed into those 11, 12 months, which is very, very relatable to the real world. Real world will not give you timelines. Hey, you're in so much pressure. Okay, do it tomorrow. It doesn't happen. And I think that was one of the sort of major differentiating factors at Great Lakes. How do you handle pressure that you are going to face once you are out of the campus? How are you going to handle those deadlines, stress, prioritization, time management? And these skills, again, cannot be taught through books, but only through very practical experience, which I think one of the differentiating factors for the 1-year program.
Absolutely, you hit the nail on the head. I think that's exactly the reasons why companies are hiring MBAs, right? They want to manage things in a crunch timeline. That's always the case in industry, and you need to learn how to prioritize, how to make the most out of what you have, right? And that's exactly what the 1-year MBA helps students to be prepared with. So once you get in the industry, you don't have the luxury. Yes, the con is that you have less slack in the program if you want to spend more time partying and all this. I think that also can happen, right? That happens all the time. Students do that, but you can't just sit back and relax. That's a one con I'd say is not there. But I ask a student to anytime a student asks this question, I just ask him back, right? Okay, you're undergrad, you spent 3 or 4 years. What percentage of time have you really spent learning? Right?
True that. Yeah.
And I don't think more than 5% of the people say more than 15%, 20%, most say less than 10%. Right? 4 years maybe you spent maybe 16 weeks, right, before each term exams, right? So that's typically the case. In a MBA, maybe you're doing that maybe 30% of the time. In a 2-year program, I've been through a 2-year program, right? so but in a 1-year program, maybe you'll do 50% of the time. You still have 50% of the time for other activities, right? Students participate in competitions. Mandar spoke about being part of the admissions committee, right? So events, parties, right? So all of that people still do, even in a 1 year, right? That means there's plenty of time. In fact, surprisingly, the current IMA director came out with an article 2 weeks back where he says that in 10 years time, he thinks the IIMs would also not offer a 2-year program. They'll only offer a 1-year program, because he feels 2 years right now is just too much time to spend. And this is like their flagship program is a 2-year program, but you have the, IMA perhaps is the model for most other schools that emulate it like to like. So he's saying that in 10 years time, it doesn't make sense to have a two years of learning, right? It makes sense to do 1 year and then, maybe do some top-up courses, right? 5-10 years down the line, learn more, right? For example, Mandar said at that time there was no AI, ML, and all those things, right? Maybe 10 years down the line there'll be something else, right? So you keep learning. It's not a one-time thing. You learn, but at the beginning you get the foundations right, and then keep adding to your skills as you go along. So we'll take up the questions from the students. So there are questions about what Great Lakes looks for. I think I'll save it for later. Maybe I'm the right person to address that, but I'd like to take up some questions which the alumni can speak more about. So in fact, some of the questions were about, whether there's a question from Piyush. He's asking Idranil whether doing a one-year program was a challenge. I think that question we already addressed.
Yeah, that we addressed already. It was not a challenge at all.
Yeah.
It was liberating, to say the least. Yeah.
And there's again a question from Aditi. How can we analyze better which role to take up for internship or placement? Right. I think in this context, let's say the placements. So I think Idranil mentioned that, once you spend 2-3 years in the industry, you get a little more clarity than when you're a fresher. But Mandar, you have any thoughts on how should students go about choosing what roles to get into?
I think it all depends on what you're interested in. So I was very clear coming into Great Lakes that I either want to move into a supply chain domain, but related to IT. So I wanted to stick with technology or consulting. So I was very clear that I will apply only to consulting or tech firms as they come into Great Lakes. And I'll either look for a consulting role, a business analyst role, or a project management role. Quite a few of my batchmates weren't very clear what they wanted to get in, but over the course of time, and obviously it all depends on the economy as well, right? At that time, as some of you may know, 2008 was quite a bad time across the world, where the economy had tanked. So it also, what is currently out there in the market, and match that to what you want to do when you get out of Great Lakes is what I would advise. So I think one of the things the placement director was very insistent on, as when we came into Great Lakes at that time, was that know what you want to get into after you get out of Great Lakes, because that's what will enable you to make the most out of your 1 year in Great Lakes. And that sort of stuck with me as I was going through my journey.
So there's a question from Abhyuday Verma, and his question is that what are the essential skills and courses to pick up during the program? One has to become proficient at strategic consulting, right? Idranil, you handle aspects of strategy. So
yeah, I think the strategy consulting, I think there are few courses that I took up. One was definitely, the finance, because finance, you really got to have a very good understanding of the corporate finance. So that's very important. Economics also very important. And the consulting at the end of the day is probably amalgamation of all the functions that are performed inside of an organization. So while you choose to specialize in finance, economics, but it's also important that you have some knowledge of marketing, supply chain, sales, so that you are able to discover the big picture much faster than others. So depending on the area that you would like to specialize in, because there could be finance consultant, there could be marketing consultant, there could be strategy consultant, who are kind of all up, you might choose your choose your subjects accordingly. But if you are a strategy consultant, it's probably the hardest, and then you probably got to have some appreciation of all the functions to some extent or the other. But I think finance, economics, marketing, supply chain, all of them come to my mind, because as I have actually dealt with these practical assignments, right, I came across fairly difficult problem statements from all of those functions.
What I would also add to what Idranil said is, obviously it is an amalgamation of all the courses, but one of the things that we do quite well at Great Lakes is sort of expose our current batch to various competitions going on across different B schools. So during my time, I participated in 3 of these competitions. One was held by IIM Calcutta, which was called Stratagem, and it was a real world problem for consumer goods industry. And you as a Great Lakes student, and you'll compete across different business schools in the country, you are expected to present a pitch on how you will solve that problem. And it involves economics, it involves finance, it involves supply chain, it involves marketing. And I mean, of course, the coursework is important and you should focus on that, but use that knowledge to sort of apply it to these competitions. And if you get it wrong, that's fine, right? But you got that experience. So that's where we sort of got an experience of actually building a forecast for that company, figuring out where their pain points in supply chain were, how the last mile delivery would happen, what is the price per unit that they can reduce to, etc. And that sort of gives you a broader perspective of how things are in the real world as you move from your MBA journey into corporate world.
And also during our time, we did not have any course on digital transformation in particular. But now that it's kind of becoming a main stage, I'm not sure whether Gautam, we are offering anything on digital transformation as well. So that Absolutely. Is also another. That's also another important aspect to specialize in, because the core principles of digital transformation doesn't really change when you move from one industry to the other, or when you move from one function to the other, right? So developing a very innate perspective of what it really takes to make a digital transformation happen, especially from the change and the softer side, because the digital is easy, but transformation is really hard. So since the world is changing at a rapid pace, so understanding the critical aspect of change management and making sure that change sticks after the implementation is what really holds the key to the kingdom, right? So being a consultant, you are not just advising and then disappearing. These days, clients often will ask you to hold on to it, at least see the early stage of the implementation, and that's where the rubber is going to meet the road. So developing some softer attributes, understanding how to connect with people, understanding, what are the kind of challenges which are keeping them up in the night. There could be a lot of anxieties partnering to a transformation, because a lot of time people think that their jobs are going to go away, right? So how to kind of convince them, how to communicate to them that this transformation is basically going to enable them to perform tasks even more efficiently, right? We call it in Microsoft, do more with less. So similarly, I think those are absolutely important attributes which need to get overlaid on top of your core functional skill. So these are a few of my perspectives. As Mandar said, that that if you already practice that in a real life setting or in a simulated environment, that probably further sharpens your skill. But a consultant is somebody who is supposed to see the big picture, bring that outside in perspective, and it thinks about the whole, not the sum of parts.
I think I'll address a few questions, maybe in slightly rapid fire, because there are a lot of questions. I think we also have a bunch of students here from the PGDM, right? And obviously they have a question, you guys are all from PGPM, right? So there are questions of what are the pros and cons of the PGPM and the PGDM, right? See, I think the real difference is in the composition of the batch and the time frame. These are the two, right? Otherwise, by now you should get a sense that the industry doesn't really care, right? Whether you spend 1 year or 2 years, if you can learn more in less time, even better, right? More power to you, right? If you say that I learned as much as a 2-year guy in 1 year, that's more impressive, right? But I think the 2-year program we launched because we wanted to also cater to the freshers. Many in India want to finish their education at one go, right? And so we have the 2-year program as well. So I think if you have less experience, the 2-year program gives you time, right, for that your thought process to become more mature, to build that perspective starting from scratch. So yes, you have less experience. The 2-year program makes all the sense. If you have 0 years or 0 months of industry exposure, your first 8 weeks in your summer internship is very valuable, right? That's a very steep learning curve that you'll have, right? So if you have less experience, you're not confident, right? You don't have the exposure, the 2-year program makes total sense, right? But if not, you have the experience, you are already in the industry, you handle challenges, you're very clear about what you want, right? And so the 1 year makes sense because you are able to achieve whatever you wanted in less time, right? So it makes total sense then. And second, you'll have a peer group with similar experiences, similar maturity level, right? Many of them you can actually learn from. There are people in the class with 7-8 years experience as well, and you can always learn from them, right? So it's a matter of whether you are prepared for that kind of a accelerated experience, right? That's the only difference. Otherwise, companies don't care, right? Whether it's PGPM, PGTM, all that they care is, do you have the skills to do the job, right? What else will they do? Right? They are not gonna. Your certificate is not gonna make the work done, right? It's your skills which are going to get the job done for them. So there was a direct question. I think this question, some of you are in UK and all, right, in different companies. So the question is, what is the value of Great Lakes certificate, right? I'm assuming that the fact that you are where you are, going across countries and across companies, clearly that tells us, but maybe one of you can just talk about it. I think Idranil or Mandar, maybe you have been in the industry for longer.
Yeah. So first of all, when I was being interviewed in any of these companies, barring the fact that the first interview that happened because I got placed with Cognizant Business Consulting from Great Lakes, so that anyway was the company that visited the campus. But after that, nobody really asked for. So I was probably challenged more in terms of the experience and what I really bring on the table, rather than the degree part. Everybody knows that it's a flagship program. It probably imparts you with the right skill. You grew up learning so many things. So once you are 2-3 years into the industry, it's not just about degree anymore. I think that's the yeah. So I, to be very frank, in my experience, I was never really asked about where have you done your MBA from, and people probably did not even go up to that. So the responsibilities that you handle, your professional accomplishments that you mention in the CV, and your positioning statement, you get quizzed about them, and there is anyway a fitment with regard to the role that is being looked at. So that was what was my experience, specifically speaking. Be it ITC, be it be it Microsoft, it was a pretty smooth ride really in that sense. I never got asked any question about that. I know Mandar and Tarun, you guys probably can add to that.
Mandar, if it's okay, can I go first?
Yeah, go on.
Thank you, sir. So, I mean, in Idranil, sir, I would 100% echo with what you just said, right? In the end, if you look at it very objectively, that physical piece of certificate ideally has no value, right? It's the learnings that you get, the work that you have done, and the sort of performance or results that you have delivered throughout the past experience. And again, even for me, when I was moving from India to London, I didn't really get quizzed a lot on why MBA, where did you do your MBA from, what subjects, etc., etc. I mean, it was entirely the sort of all the interview processes I had were on the actual work that I had done and what was the resultant that I had delivered or the value that I had delivered for my past employers from my work.
Yeah, I think it's logical as well, right? Companies don't hire certificates; they hire people to get their job done, right? So it's about your capabilities and what you have demonstrated in past job, right? Only at the beginning of your career, because people may not have so much experience. Companies do check. Okay, you are an MBA, right? And from a good school, which means that they did the filtering for you, and they must have imparted the right skills, right? Once you are post that, it's always about your track record, right? And that's also an important message for all of you, because don't look at an MBA as a shortcut to getting a good job, right? Then you'll do the minimum required. That means you're not fully taking the full benefit of the learning, which would help you for the next 30-40 years, right? If you're only passing the exams, waking up one night before, or you're not participating in the projects, you're letting your friends do it, right? Don't do it for academic scores. Companies don't ask about your academic scores within the program. They definitely don't ask you once you gain 5-10 years of experience. But do an MBA because you actually truly want to learn and become more capable, right? Because that's what is going to help you build the track record over the next 10, 15, 20 years, right? It gives you the best platform to do better, think better, right? So do it for the transformation, right? And that's what is going to help you for the next 30 years, right? Grow faster. We talked about it before, right? And as far as companies go, these are all global companies, right? All three of them are working in world's largest companies, which drive our everyday lives more than any other company, perhaps, between Microsoft, Amazon, right? We have alumni in Google and Facebook as well in very senior roles. They're in US. Maybe in the next one we'll have them as well. But these companies would have the chance or the privilege or the luxury of hiring from any school anywhere in the world, right? And they do, right? I'm sure your colleagues are from all kinds of schools from India, Europe, or US, right? And the fact that it's a level playing field. Once you demonstrate experience and expertise, I think it's a level playing field. Doesn't matter where you have studied. I think that's more to just give you a start and the platform.
Start for sure, Gautam. I mean, a bit. I mean, again, for me personally, there is something that I would want to add. I mean, doing an MBA from whatever XYZ college, it does help open some doors for sure.
Yeah. I said at the beginning, but once the more you gain
obviously,
experience,
I mean, it doesn't mean that if I'm today wherever, let's say, if I graduate from Harvard, I'll become the CEO of whichever company I join. Never works that way. Once you are 2 years, 3 years into your work, it's all about you, your capability, and not where you're coming from at all. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah. I think there are a bunch of students, again, both in PM and DM, who said they're coming from a commerce background or a non-engineering background, right? What do they need to do, and would they be at a disadvantage? As I said, now we are looking at a much higher diversity. I think in our PGDM program, I think 50% of the students are non-engineers. A lot of them from commerce, maybe 20-25% would be from commerce. And even in PGPM, I think now 40% are at least, or 40 to 50% are non-IT or non-engineers, right? So I don't think that's any different, right? If you're anyway, there's a selection process, right? I think if you're assuming that non-engineer means maybe slightly less analytical skills, but again, that's not necessarily the case. There can be people coming from different backgrounds with very good analytical skills. So Tarun, you'd like to add?
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you a real life example of somebody from our batch. So there was this girl who was selling real estate, right? She was actually selling houses for a few years in her initial career. And then she was wedding planning. And that's when, after selling houses, doing wedding planning, no commerce, no nothing, no science, BTech, etc., she joined Great Lakes. And that girl cracked the sort of most sorted out dream job at that point of time, the however you want to call it, best brand, best package, and she was hired. So, and all of us, with BTech, XYZ percentages, so on and so forth, couldn't crack that. So yeah, the diversity, your background can definitely, work as an advantage if you have that sort of mindset, for sure.
Yeah, in fact, I can think of many examples. I think the person heading H&M e-commerce for South Asia is an alum, I think from 2015 itself. Right, she came from an NIFT background, visual merchandiser, right? So like that, there are many people who come from. It's just that people look at statistics at the top level is 50% engineers, right? It's like one group. The fact is that it's very different within that segment, right? Within that, there are people who are stronger in analytical skills, some are stronger in communication skills. It's not, it depends from individual to individual. Don't look at anything in terms of grouping. Every individual is unique. I think what you need to focus is what your, not your degrees, but what your actual strengths and weaknesses are, right? That's what is going to determine, not your degrees. Okay. So I think there are a few more questions regarding specializations and all. Yes, we can take dual majors, major, minor. Again, we have other webinars where we talk about those things, but I think let's utilize this time to get relevant perspectives from our alumni, right? And the most useful ones. So I think there are a couple of questions on A, what does Great Lakes expect from the students, and B, advice on what should one be doing to get the most out of the program. I think these are the really relevant questions, right? So I'd like all of you to give your take on that, and then we'll wrap it up, right? So basically, advice to students. Many of them actually have already been through the interviews. They got an offer letter. Some are still in the interview process. So they have the next 3-4 months before they actually come into campus. So what would be your advice, both for short term, long term?
I think if I can start. So I think I saw some questions around books and everything, but I generally don't advise on books because you already have too much to read during your course at Great Lakes. But one of the things that I definitely felt I could have done better at Great Lakes now, looking back, is networking. So, as Idranil said, and even Tarun said, networking with the current batch. So you get a diverse perspective across your batch, people from different experience and skill sets. So networking amongst your peer group, but also networking with the industry. So whatever chances that you get to get out of the classroom, I'm not saying bunk classes, but get out of the classroom and go into the field. So whether it is doing a marketing survey for your empirical study, or tie up with industry, as Idranil said, they were doing during their time, right? Meeting with as many prospective employers, but don't look at them as employers. Look at them as somebody who can give you industry knowledge. Participating in competitions as much as possible. And then obviously being part of a committee if that interests you. Because for me, I would say that was the single biggest benefit of Great Lakes for me, is getting that hands-on experience, which I could then apply to my real life. So one of the things that I used to do when I was thinking, should I go out and party or should I do something else, right? So I would say, what am I investing in terms of time and money in Great Lakes, and divided by 365? That's what I'm investing per day. What do I do with this investment? Do I spend it in, partying or going out? And you can still do that, but invest your 1 year rightly, because it will go fast. Really, it will fly. And by the time you get out, you'll be thinking, I'm never going to get this time back once you get into the corporate world. So invest it well, get out of the classroom, or look at other courses that you can do, optional courses that you can do, network with industry specialists, and network even within your current batch. That's one thing I would say to get the best out of your 1 year.
And I would definitely like to double down on what Mandar said, but I would also think that in the current world, right, because where every function is kind of becoming very, very deep. So the specialization is probably the name of the game right now, because every function in its own right is a specialization itself, right? So you choose your specialism and make sure that you are so deep in that area that nobody can topple you in that, and then you develop slightly wider perspective. So there are multiple ways to do that. One is definitely to have an industry affiliation, to network with people who specialize in that industry, listen as much as you can, consume as much as you can, and college is anyway a great platform. You can also identify from the college as to who are already part of college alumni, who are already specialists in that area, what kind of work they're doing in that space. So from a 1 year program, I think it gives you ample opportunity to specialize in your chosen field, and that's where you should absolutely double down on. And going back to the question of what Great Lakes typically looks for in a candidate, and I will probably share my perspective based on the interview that I undertook and definitely things might have changed a little bit, because it's still quite a few years lapsed after my interview took place. So one thing is basically the depth and the quality of the experience that I was supposed to bring on the table, because they were just not only looking at it from how authentic I was, but also what kind of effect, what kind of multiplier effect that I can create within the rest of the peer group as well. They were also looking at my financial acumen, my commercial acumen, since I was coming from the strategy field. So there are a lot of questions about that. And then the quality of articulation, the clarity of thought process, giving you fairly complex case and then asking me to break it down to its elements and then solve them piece by piece, and eventually ability to simplify, right? At the end of the day, all of us are very good at making things complex, but only few people can actually make even a complex things fairly simple, right? So I thought those are the soft attributes that Great Lakes looked out for. And definitely they also did test me on my own subject, which was probably a little more technical. But I would think these are probably the common attributes, and this will not change between 2006-7 to 2023-24 or even beyond, right? Those are core attributes of clarity of thought, and the depth of your experience, your articulation capability, your ability to share, your ability to network with others. All those things get tested implicitly. That's my take, really. Tarun, over to you.
Tarun, you have been the closest, I think, just 6 years out. So what advice you would like to give?
Right. So, I mean, first of all, I think to each person, things work differently. So again, for the audience, it's not a one size fits all kind of approach. What worked for Mandar sir, what worked for Idranil sir might be very different from what worked for me. So keep that in mind. And getting back onto the question on what skills uh, does Great Lakes look at? So again, I cannot answer on behalf of the institution itself, but from my personal experience, I think in terms of my background, I was, nothing different, because I think every second applicant had the same background that I did, right? Engineer, IT, MBA. Right? It wasn't, so I don't think I had anything different from that perspective. However, I do remember during the interview process, I was asked about, okay, what do you want out of this 1 year? What sort of job profile are you looking at? And I remember I mentioned a few options there. One of them was, I want to do management consulting, strategic consulting. Again, like every second person had that kind of thought. But then again, I was very grilled on, okay, you want to do consulting. So they gave me a pure play, proper sort of industry interview scenario. That I had a whole situation. Now you're a consultant. How would you handle that? And I think the skill that really uh, they sort of pursued or highlighted was the critical thinking bit of it, on how I was able to think on my feet, give them a solution that um, worked, and thought that, okay, maybe, apart from the profile, people can think critically, can think on their feet. And again, like Indranil also mentioned, had some people skills in terms of communication, relatability, so on and so forth. So that's part one for me. Again, like I said, it's not a one size fits all approach. This is just what my personal opinion is and my personal experience was. On the second point around what you should look for, again, I think I gained 3 or 4 very important things which happened to me in those 11 months and are here to stay, hopefully, for the rest of my life. One of them was I built a habit to read books out of my curriculum. Great Lakes, again, talking on the infrastructure point, I think one of my favorite places in those 11 months was the college library. I mean, the plethora, the variety of topics, the books you have, I mean, it's amazing. I loved it. Every evening I mean, I made sure that I spend some time reading something for sure, right? You have all of these periodicals subscribed for you. Economic Times, Economist, I remember, was there, and it's all there for you at your disposal, free of cost. And I think that's something I really picked up very, very well, just going beyond the generic curriculum books. So, find something new to do. You have those 11 months, pick up something. The other thing in terms of what you should be doing, or what happens, or what sort of job profile you want. Again, from my personal point of view, my suggestion would be to keep your mind open, and to be very, very connected to the outside reality. So as an example, again, if you're thinking straight out of Great Lakes, you'll become a strategic consultant, and you'll do something like what Mandar sir and Idranil sir are doing after over a decade of experience. Ain't gonna happen, buddy. It's not going to happen. You're not managing a $5 billion, $10 billion business right outside of college. So right, stay connected to the reality, keep an open mind, and know what you're getting into. You might not get the exact role in the exact company with the exact brand you're looking for, but that's not the end of the world. It's not the end of the story. And like I was saying earlier, think of it as something which opens doors. Be ready to have a few different paths to walk onto, and then you can always change, improve, modify a few years down the line.
Yeah. I think I couldn't agree more with all the perspectives that were shared. And to sum up, I mean, I have done my own MBA. I did a 2-year program. Again, 2007. Not from Great Lakes, but under decent school. And a few things, I think I learned a lot more outside the classroom than inside the classroom. A lot of the learning was actually based on participating in events, being part of committees that Mandar mentioned. As the only guy in 2 different sought after committees. I was at MDI Gurgaon, and so yeah, that was a lot of slogging, but that was also a lot of learning. Second, Tarun mentioned about reading books beyond the curriculum. So I used to be a voracious reader. So same here. I think I learned more stuff from reading some of these novels, which are in a way related to business, right? And again, non-fiction, right? There are great books in, for example, about leverage buyouts.
Sorry to interrupt, Gautam. I forgot to mention, it's not reading Harry Potter, it's reading more business oriented books.
Yeah. There's also great books in fiction. For example, there's a book called Barbarians at the Gate. It's about the leverage buyouts. Right, fascinating book, right? These are, some are pure fiction, some are based on reality, but some are also non-fiction, right? If you read books about what happened during 2007-8 financial crisis, you learn so much about, right, more than any textbook, right, how the world works, right? Similarly, there are great books in every different sphere. So I would say that some students ask the questions like, what certifications I should do and all, right? I would not really say that you need to do some certifications and all, right? What matters are your core skills, right? And your perspectives. Anything that you need for a job, you learn, right? You learn during business school, you start from scratch. Yes, maybe you are inclined towards analytics or AI machine learning, then you can, always do some programs, short-term courses there. Nowadays, you get them given for free or on many platforms, right? You can always do that, right? But don't think of everything as certifications, right? Think about doing things which would help you think broader, not just in depth, but also think broader, get a larger perspective, and that primarily you get by networking. I think Mandar and Idranil talked about it. Talk to people as much as you can in the classroom, right? And people who come, there are a lot of alumni, a lot of corporate leaders who come to the campus to take sessions, maybe talk to them 10 minutes, They stay out after the session for 10-15 minutes, so you can hang out with them, ask them a few questions, right? Maybe exchange phone numbers, right? So you learn from people. Then you learn by reading, right? That's very scalable, right? The world's top CEOs, and you are on a level playing field, right? In terms of your access to books. Any book that you want on the planet, you can get it in the library if it's not there, but there'll be enough good books at least to keep you busy. But even beyond, right? And these are lifelong habits. This is not one time, right? Maybe the MBA is a time where you start building these habits or before you go to business school, but you should be doing that throughout your career, right? Look at any top business leader in the world, right? Bill Gates to Jeff Bezos to Elon Musk to Warren Buffett, right? I'm sure they're all super busy guys. Their time value of their money value of time is supremely high, right? Each minute there'll be like millions of dollars worth, but they all are voracious readers. Bill Gates, I know, has not just been reading, but has been writing reviews of books, right, on weekly basis for many years. Elon Musk is running 4 or 5 companies. He's still a voracious reader. Somebody asked him like, how did you learn about rocket science, right? His first company was, X, which became PayPal and all, right? He was not a rocket scientist. He simply said, I read from books, right? So you can seek knowledge from anywhere, right? You just have to be open. So building habits is what is more important, right? It's not important what particular thing you're studying, right? You can read books on psychology, about, society. It can be any different area, and all of them come together, right? When you start making decisions, you start connecting the dots. So that's an important thing, to build those habits of networking, learning from people, learning by reading, right? And in general, being curious, right? And also finally acting, right? Not just listening and all, but actually learning by doing things, right? Which may be through committees, through events, to participating in competitions, because ultimately MBA is not about theoretical knowledge. It's all about doing things, right? And the more you do, the better you learn. Simple as that, right? 2 years of sitting in the classroom is not going to make you any better, or 3 years is not going to make you any better. That's going to only be looked down upon if you say, I spent 3 years doing the same thing. What matters is how much you are actually doing outside the classroom, right? So be open to working on things, taking responsibilities, leading teams. All of that is actually going to make you a lot more valuable. So I think we'll wrap it at that. We are already well past the slot. So thank you so much, Mandar, Tarun, and Idranil, for taking the time out today. And I'm sure your experiences have given new perspectives to many of the students who are either very early in their careers or just graduated, right? That I'm sure that gives them a lot of food for thought at the stage where they're in getting into a business school. So thanks a lot, and hope to be in touch.